Hi guys, this is Todd from the Our Sword Bible blog, and I was having my daily devotion here, reading along, and I'm doing my chapter by chapter read through the Bible right now, and I was just at the end of First Chronicles, and I found something that stuck out, and I figured I would share that with you. And I'm going to start here in Exodus 25. Now, a lot of people already know, maybe you don't, but a lot of people already know that God gave a set of blueprints to Moses. And what these blueprints were for was the sanctuary, the temple, the tabernacle, where they did all the sacrificing, right? And this was so important, the sanctuary and how it was set up, how it was made, was so important to God. Just as God, the Ten Commandments were so important to God that he didn't even allow Moses to write those down, but God himself wrote the Ten Commandments with his own finger in the tables of stone. Just as that was so essential to God that he wouldn't trust it into human hands, so too was the building and the pattern of this sanctuary so important to him that he would not trust it to human hands and just say, make it to where there's one room in the front that has this stuff in it, one room in the back that has this stuff in it. No, no, no. If you look here, let's see. If you look, where is it? Here we go. In Exodus 25 and verse 8. And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. This is God talking to Moses. According to all that I show thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall ye make it. And he goes on to enumerate exactly how to make everything in the sanctuary. And you can read that yourself. I mean, every little thing. He goes and he goes and he goes and he goes and he goes. And even on the next chapter, he's still going. Make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue and purple and scarlet, and cherubims of cunning work shalt thou make them. It's to the minutest detail God gives here. And what I want you to really hone in on and notice is that it is all according to the pattern that he showed Moses. He showed Moses a very specific pattern. Every length, every measurement of every wall, of every curtain, of every table, every single material that everything was to be made of and overlaid with, or made from pure gold or whatever, to the exact things that were embroidered in certain linens and such. Everything was exactly so. And you learn that if you turn, well, let's just say, so that was the sanctuary, the first sanctuary that Moses built, that went with Israel as they traveled for 40 years in the desert, and then on into when they settled the promised land. They would always take down this huge tent structure sanctuary and then set it up again wherever they went. And that is where the pillar of fire and the cloud of smoke would rest, right there on top of the most holy place, inside of which was the Ark of the Covenant, on top of which was the mercy seat where the presence of God dwelt, under which were the actual tables of stone carved with the fingers of God, the Ten Commandments, right there in the most holy place, under the mercy seat, and which is a lesson in itself. But here I was today, finishing off the book of First Chronicles, and let me tell you, very difficult reading. The first 10 chapters of First Chronicles, very difficult, a lot of names. You can see here, this is about how it is for the first 10 chapters. And there are things to be learned here, but sometimes it is a little hard just to push through, but you've got to do it. And especially sometimes slow down, because sometimes there's little gems, like the prayer of Jabez. There's little gems mixed in with these genealogies and whatnot. And there's other things you can learn. And there's things you can learn about the character of God and hard work and patience, even in the idea that God would include such minute detail in His Word. So here I was at the end, and the last part of Chronicles is again a lot of that kind of stuff when it's talking about how David was splitting up, all these different the Levites and what their jobs would be and such, and getting everything ready for his son Solomon to build the house of God, which would be the temple, so that the Ark of the Covenant would not dwell in a tent anymore. So Israel had finally settled the promised land. God said, David, you're not going to build my sanctuary because you are a man of, you've spilled blood, you're a man of war. And even though you had to do that maybe in some of these circumstances, I prescribed that. Unfortunately, that is still outside of a perfect representation of me. So because your hands are bloody, you're not going to be the one to build my temple. It'll be for your son, who will be a man of peace. And so here we are, David's handing everything over to his son. And let's see. Where was it here? Oh, here we go. It was right here. For the pattern of the chariots, yes. Yeah, so I think this is where it was here. When it was speaking right here. And for the altar of incense refined by golden weight, and gold for the pattern of the chariot of the cherubims that spread out their wings and covered the Ark of the Covenant. All this, said David, the Lord made me. All this, he's telling Solomon, he's giving Solomon all this instruction about how the house of the Lord is going to be built, the permanent, beautiful, grand sanctuary. And he says, all this, said David, the Lord made me understand in writing by his hand upon me, even all the works of this pattern. There you have it again, a pattern. So even with this, and I didn't realize this until just now, to be honest with you. I'd only realized that God gave the pattern to Moses for the sanctuary. And I just kind of assumed, I guess, that when they built the the actual temple sanctuary, and not just the tent sanctuary, that they followed kind of the same pattern. But you know what? It is completely different. And you can see even here with the temple sanctuary made of stone and wood and all this stuff, God gave this understanding in writing to David by his hand upon him. God's hand was on David to write all this down, even all the works of this pattern. God gave David the blueprints for the temple, again, 2 times. So he gave one blueprint to Moses for the temporary, the movable sanctuary, and then he gave blueprints again for the permanent structure of the temple to David. It's amazing. And if you turn to the book of Hebrews, why that is important, why it matters, you think, okay, so obviously this is very important to God, but why? Why was it so important to God? Why was God so specific about the sanctuary? And if you turn to Hebrews chapter 9, you'll start to get an idea. Look at this. Then verily the first covenant had also ordinances of divine services and a worldly sanctuary. Okay, it's talking about a worldly sanctuary. For there was a tabernacle made, the first tabernacle, wherein was the candlestick, the table, the showbread, which is called the sanctuary, and after the second to the holiest of all, or the most holy place, with the golden censer, the Ark of the Covenant. And And so you see that there's a worldly, it says, a worldly sanctuary. But let's see. If we come in here and look around, you will see that, here we go. But Christ, being come and high priest of good things to come by a greater and more perfect tabernacle or sanctuary, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building. So you've got a worldly sanctuary, and now you see that, and you saw that when God gave the plans, the blueprints to Moses, it was a pattern, right? A blueprint, a pattern of something else. Now we're starting to see that more particularly. And when God gave the pattern to David, you're starting to see that that it was something else here. Not of this building. Let's see. Let's see here. Here we go. Here we go. It was therefore necessary that the patterns, now what were these sanctuary patterns of? The patterns of things in the heavens should be purified with these. That's blood of goats and bulls and sheep, lambs. The pattern of things in heaven should be purified with these, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ is not entered into the holy places made with hands, which are the figures of the true, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Do you see this? There's holy places, the sanctuary, the holy place, the most holy place. There's the sanctuary made with hands, and they were figures of the true sanctuary, which is in heaven, which is not made by hands. Now that's something else, isn't it? So there's something that you should look into. And why? Why was this so important to God that he would give the blueprints exactly to Moses and say, build it exactly, everything, exactly like I said. And he would give the blueprints to David and say, build this temple exactly like I said, according to everything that I said. It's because this sanctuary was a miniature, a little replica, a pattern of the true sanctuary that is in heaven, the true tabernacle of God, the true dwelling place of God. And in the book of Psalms, you will find God says, for my way is in the sanctuary. Do you want to know God's way? Then study the sanctuary. Study the sanctuary services. Get familiar with them, because it all pointed to something greater. Not just the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. There's more truth than that. If it was just the sacrifice of Christ on the cross, then all they would need would be the altar of burnt sacrifices that was not even inside of the sanctuary. Like if this was the sanctuary, let's say this stitches the veil. Here's the holy place, which had the showbread. Here'd be the showbread would be here, table of showbread. The seven-branch candlestick would be here. The altar of incense would be here. Here's the veil. Inside of this white square is the most holy place, where there was the Ark of the Covenant, right, with the covering cherubs, with the Ten Commandments inside. Only the high priest ever went into this compartment, and he only went in there once a year on the Day of Atonement. And so let's say, so this is outside. Let's say this is the courtyard, right? So here's the door. You go in. This is the holy place where they did the ministering every day. Here's the courtyard. In the courtyard, outside of the sanctuary, in the courtyard would be one, a laver of water that the priest would have to wash in to cleanse themselves before going inside of this sanctuary. And then in front of that would be the altar of burnt sacrifice. This is where they would slaughter the lamb and they would put it on here and burn it up, right? This would be all you need if this whole sanctuary service only talked about Jesus Christ. If it was only about, well, it is all about Jesus Christ, but if it was only about Jesus Christ's sacrifice on the cross, because that is symbolized right here in the altar of burnt offerings. That's where the lamb was sacrificed and burnt, and that would be it. But there's more, because after the sacrifice was burnt here and some of his blood was taken, the priest washed themselves in this laver of water. They entered into the holy place with the blood of the sacrifice, and they would sprinkle it over here on the altar of incense. And the smoke of the incense was always rising up and over past the veil into the most holy place, into the presence of God. Okay? All of this has symbolism, even beyond just the sacrifice of Christ. The application of the sacrifice onto the altar of incense, and the smoke that arises and goes into the presence of God. The 7-branched candlestick, the table of showbread with 12 pieces of unleavened bread, 2 stacks, 6 and 6. There's reasons for all of this, and for the daily ministry of the priests in here. And then especially the once a year, the final, the Day of Atonement, when only the high priest would bring it into the most holy place, and he would sprinkle the blood on the mercy seat, on the Ark of the Covenant. What goes on in here once a day, once a year, hugely significant, especially to our days, because what went on here once a year on the Day of Atonement, and anyone who didn't, any part of Israel that didn't take part of this Day of Atonement, they were cut off from the whole camp. They were done for. You can't miss out on this. And we are living in the end days, which is what this service was pointing towards. So that's what I'm saying. This sanctuary here, this pattern, and what the priests did, and just how it all ran. God says, my way is in the sanctuary. In this sanctuary pattern, in the sanctuary services, this is where God's way of salvation is revealed. So study it. Look it up. Be faithful. Amen.